We are live.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is David Mossberg. I representing Secretary of State Walter Mosley for this New York State Hearing Aid Advisory Board meeting. Today is May 28th, 2024. It is currently 10:48. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. And I will just go into the first item on the agenda, which is introduction and roll call. Can we get introduction from New York City, please? So board members and anybody at the table, if you'd like to just announce yourself, we welcome you.
Sure. This is Brant Campbell, the designee for the New York State Office of the Attorney General.
This is Jerry Bergman, Hearing Loss Association representative on the Dispensing board.
Is there anyone else in New York City?
No, just the two of us.
In Albany?
This is Candy Burchett. I'm the board coordinator, Department of State.
Norma Rosario, Department of State.
John Clement, Department of State.
Allison Lacey, Department of State.
Eric Freeman, non-audiologist, is hearing aid dispenser.
Again, Dave Mossberg representing the secretary.
Khalil Al-Shir, representing Department of Health.
Emily Luby, Department of State.
So with the introduction, note that we do not have a quorum for today's board meeting with only two voting members present. So we'll just go on to the next item agenda. New business, practical exam scheduling. Allison, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We received a question from a board member on the scheduling of exams. The question that was asked. My name is Allison Lacey. The question that the board member asked us was why our written exam dates are posted online, but practical exam dates are not posted online. The reasoning behind this is written exams can be administered by exam proctors and do not require industry experts to be present for the examination. Written exams can also be administered in groups. Because of the flexibility in administering the written exams, we can administer them as walk-in exams to qualified individuals with no pre-registration required. On the other hand, practical exams must be administered by industry experts. The department works with licensed dispensers to administer our practical examinations. Practical exams must also be administered to each person individually, not in a group setting. Due to the way this exam is scheduled and administered, we cannot post a schedule of practical exam dates. Applicants waiting to take an exam will be scheduled by our office. We schedule applicants in date order by the date of their exam application. To help lessen the wait time for practical exams, we have added an additional exam location in Rockland County. We are also recruiting additional practical examiners. The position was recently posted online at State Jobs, a website used by New York State to fill vacant positions. We encourage anyone interested in becoming a practical examiner to submit their resume to us by email. And that email address, if you're interested, is the word exams, which is EXAMS @dos.ny.gov. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Allison. The next, so for the court reporter, this is Dave Mossberg. The next item on the agenda, the next two items are actually from board member Eric Friedman. The first is the OTC advertising, and the other is the brochure update. So Eric?
My name's Eric Freeman, and so as a registered dispenser, I have several patients that have come into my office not requesting over-the-counter hearing aids as the initial beginning of the conversation about helping them. But there is sometimes the need to bring up when an over-the-counter hearing aid is a necessity. Usually the patient may say, well, that's a little more expensive. What about these OTCs? The board had put out the other year over OTC versus prescribed. Has that been addressed on the website as easier access to that? Because on the second portion of my question is the brochure updates is where access to those sites would be more beneficial as well, because the consumer is not going to go to the Department of State and ask, what's the difference between OTC and a prescribed hearing aid? So it's up to the prescribers, the dispensers, to have more information on that. And we're not allowed to really go into talking about too much of that because the regulations or lack thereof for over-the-counter hearing aids. So is there any better clarification that we can use?
So are you asking where are these documents stored on the website?
I found just recently where it was on the website. Wasn't as easy to find as I would have hoped to find it, but there's really no access or awareness for the consumer to know about the difference of OTC versus prescribed. So whether it was through advertising or programs where OTCs are sold, so there's something there, so the consumer could be aware, because there's such a vast difference between OTC and a prescribed hearing aid. We already know that in this profession that when someone has troubles with an OTC, they try the hearing aid, and they're going to wait longer to get the right help. So how can we get the right information? As a dispenser, I can advocate only when I can, and yet for this type of product line, we're not allowed to.
Well, so
We're not allowed, we're not advertising it per se, but
right. Well, let me ask you this. So the information that you found on the website, because the board, we revised these materials.
correct.
And so, to the best as I understood, the board as well as public input went into the creation of those documents.
Right.
So it's not that the information that is in those documents is misleading or inaccurate, it's just
Correct.
how to make that more widely available.
Correct, the accessibility.
Right, so, obviously, the Division of Licensing, we have in a particular audience, and I think you mentioned the consumers probably aren't gonna go to us.
Right.
But I think with the understanding that the information that we have is accurate and helpful, I think what we could do internally is I know that for example, our main website, we changed the banner, so we could talk to our press team or digital team that's in charge of that.
Mhm.
We rotate that, I think monthly or periodically, so we could see if we could get that to the main banner again. We can also work with our friends at the State Division of Consumer Protection, because I know that they provided input in this document originally. I don't know if these materials are also on their website or if it's just the Division of Licensing. So we could talk to them about adding it there, because as a consumer, you might go to the State Division of Consumer Protection to see if it's there as well. So that's something that we could talk to our digital team about, seeing about if we could get it to the top banner, putting it on State Division of Consumer Protection. I know State Division of Consumer Protection and the Secretary, we have a Twitter and Facebook and social media account, so we could see if we could add that to rotation sort of as a reminder to hopefully those that we can reach that could benefit by it. So that's something that I think we would be able to go back and talk to the appropriate people about. I'm glad that the information that you found, you're saying is correct and good. It's just, we want more people to be able to view it.
More accessibility.
Right, so
Now-
that's something that I think we could talk internally and maybe have something to share at the next board meeting about.
Can it be shared also then maybe with the Department of Health? Because a lot of people do reach out to the Department of Health, Department of Aging, Office of the Aging, and that could be a better venue for this information to get around to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for.
No, we can't speak for any other.
Right,
This is, an advisory board,
right,
and if we could get that information out, because with the onset of new technology and how this profession is changing, it's more than just the hearing aid dispenser these days.
right.
It's taking care of and advocating for the consumer. And there's such a need for improving the communication.
Yeah, like I said, I can't speak for any other agencies or any other board members. But, I think certainly we would be willing to look at what resources are available to the secretary and see what we would be able to do to try to get this messaging out there. So we'll definitely take that back.
Okay. On the brochure update, I appreciate that the website was just recently updated early April. I was looking for the consumer guide for almost a year. It disappeared. Don't know where it went to. I found it under the business section, not under the business registration versus a registered dispenser. There's two different sections. So I think it just got updated now where it's on both, if I saw that correctly.
Potentially, yeah. You mentioned we just recently updated the entire department's website, multiple pages, so it could be something that maybe got placed to the wrong page or added like that. But that's all part of, I think, the same discussion that we have to have internally about getting it to the audience. So I'll definitely talk to our team about that.
Because a lot of that information is required by regulations for dispensers to provide directly to the consumer when they're purchasing hearing aids.
Yes.
And if that was not able to be done, there becomes the problem of, we're not doing our job right.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate you letting us know. I know we've had been working on those updates for a while, trying to revisit like every page to make sure everything's there. But again, that's just I think something that we would be easily accomplished by talking to the digital team about. So it's not a problem for us. Does anybody else have comments about the website or the information that's posted there, or questions about what we've done at the department?
This is
Hi, Jerry.
Jerry. I'm not sure if Eric was speaking about the consumer guide that we had worked on several years ago to update.
Yes,
Yeah, okay. I
yes.
also looked online, not recently, but also maybe a month ago, and couldn't find it anywhere on the dispensing board's website, which is where it used to be. There were two versions, as I recall, going way back. There was a long version, which might have been 10 or 12 pages or something like that. And there was a short trifold version, and that was just condensed from the larger one. But we updated both to include assistive listening technology as a point for people to understand. So I think it's important that the staff look into the availability of those two items on the dispensing board website. And when I don't recall recently, but it used to be that the longer version, maybe even the shorter version, had a list of resources, consumer resources, that third-party type resources, websites and so forth. And I think that that's an important item to offer. I have a kind of a related issue to bring up in terms of who does what. As Dave, you were talking about it. As you know, I think, and some of the others probably, we now have coming into formation an interagency advisory council within the governor's office for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. And that's to bring together around the table periodically board members who represent our disability communities, deaf, blind, and hard of hearing, and a like number of representatives of the various state agencies. So I think the question of how do we get out information and what information should we get out about hearing loss, that the IAC, Interagency Coordinating Council, should be a useful point of reference for you.
Thank you, Jerry. We'll definitely see what we can learn about that, and if we can, reach out and seeing if, again, that will help reach the audience that we're trying to protect. So that's a good point. So thanks for mentioning that.
Is there any guidance for registered dispensers in managing and handling OTC a little better than what's been presented already? Anything that we need to be aware of or they need to be aware of?
Not that I'm aware of in terms of any changes since the federal regulation. In fact, since the board met to discuss those changes and create the documents that we were just discussing. So there hasn't been any new law that I'm aware of or anything.
Is a hearing healthcare provider at risk of registration issues if someone comes into my office, an example says, hey, I'd like you to talk about over-the-counter hearing aid, and I want to suggest to them the importance of
I don't know what happened.
Now, I understand that I'm not allowed to per se do that, but as a registered dispenser to walk into my office about hearing health.
I mean, obviously, everything is always going to be fact specific, right? So I can't represent what the department would do on a hypothetical.
Thank you, Jack.
We would have to have more information about what was said to you from the client and then what you said in response. So I'm not in a position to just answer a hypothetical like that. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is D, Candy.
For the court reporter, Candy Burchett. The next advisory board meeting will be Tuesday, August 13th at 1 p.m.
Thank you, Candy.
You're welcome.
There being no new business, I will go to the next item on the agenda, which is public comment. Just confirm any members of the public in New York City that wish to provide public comment.
David, before we get to public comment, can I just raise a sticky wicket? I've brought it up at previous meetings. It has to do with the fact that from the time several years ago I first joined the board, we had a pretty good representation of representatives, and out of the 13 we must have had at any one time anywhere from 10 to 12 positions filled. Right now, you asked about a quorum. There are 13 positions, as you know, and there are 8 vacancies. So if my math is correct, we'll never have a quorum until those vacancies are filled. So let me again ask if you can talk to what's being done to fill the vacancies, those 8 positions, some of which are 2 or 3 years unfilled.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are aware of the vacancies. It's just one of the things that we are continually trying to get filled in. It's something we're aware of. It's something that we want to try to address. So, at this point, I don't have any updates other than to say this is something that we do continually try to work on and to get engagement in. It's important. And it's just something that we're continuing to work on.
Can somebody explain what you're trying to do? Because I don't hear
Well, the
any
first thing-
specifics about any initiative coming from Albany to try to fill these vacancies.
Well, so the first thing is,
You've asked in the past that we submit nominees.
and have you done that?
The initiative should come from your end, and we can be responsive if somebody will reach out and try to work on recruiting people. I think that's the only way it's gonna happen.
Again, that's something that we are continually trying to do, looking for candidates, and also having candidates come to us to show an interest in being on the board. And it's just one of those things that we are continuing.
Where have you reached out to recruit candidates? The Hearing Loss Association has not been contacted ever. Have you
But they know-
contacted
but have they put
clinics
forward-
for audiologists,
Right, but these
associations?
groups
I don't
know
see
about.
any effort on your end. I'm sorry.
Right, but these groups know about the need for vacancies, and they haven't recommended anyone.
It's not our responsibility, it's yours.
Okay.
Do you not agree with that?
I think that any person who has a desire to be a member of this board and knows about the vacancies could reach out and say they want to participate and be a member of the board. These groups know about the vacancies. If they want to put forward a candidate, they know how to reach us, and we gladly try to get people on the board.
You're saying the status quo is okay?
That's not what I said at
The fact that you
all.
have these vacancies and you're
That's
sitting
not-
back waiting for people to come forward.
No,
That's
that's
what I
not
hear
what
you
I.
saying, is that correct?
That's absolutely 100% not correct. 0%
Well, then could you
of
give
what you
us
said is
specifics
correct.
of what you are doing?
Again, I'm on the council side of things, so I can't get into the specifics on the program level. But certainly, and it's an open invitation to anyone on the board or anyone who's watching this WebEx meeting, or anyone who is interested in this issue. If you're interested in participating on the board, contact the Department of State. If you'd like us to send a specific letter to your organization to see if any people there wish to join, I think we could certainly do that as well.
Can I put a proposal to maybe reach out to the different programs that are in New York State, such as Hearing Healthcare Alliance New York, HLAA,
Sure.
NISHLA, and say, we are looking for people to
I
put
mean-
interest into
Yeah,
strengthening the board.
I'm surprised that those organizations aren't aware of the vacancies, but if they need a specific invitation from the department, I think we can work with programs.
I know a couple have put names forward, and I think that's where it's stalled is in the next step
Well, so the next step is,
at the individual offices of the governor or
yes,
and so forth.
right, so if these names have been put forward and it's being installed there, there's unfortunately not much we would be able to do, particularly when, I see that the Senate minority has an open vacancy.
Correct.
The president of the Senate. So, it's not all within our power to fill the
Right.
board, but this is definitely something that we know is a problem. So certainly, if anyone has an interest, we welcome you to contact the department. But I think we can reach out to those organizations that,
And I believe that's been done before as well.
I believe it has, but again, I can't speak to that because I'm on the council side
Right.
of things, so I'm not with the program. But I find it very hard to believe that those groups or organizations don't know about this board and also don't know about the vacancies. But if they would like a specific special invitation, I'm sure we could reach out to them. All right.
Excuse me. This is Brant from New York. Just a quick question. If you can just kind of walk through the process. So once you have names for people that are interested in being on the board, can you describe what the process is then? Does it have to be submitted to the governor's office for approval, or how does that work?
So
If you know.
depends, well, so it depends on obviously like what the current vacant position is. So under the statute, there are, 4 individuals who have to be licensed non-audiologist dispensers, 4 have to be audiologist dispensers, 2 are gonna be otolaryngologists, and then 3 are what the statute calls lay members of the public. So depending on, who the individual is and what their qualifications are, then under the statute, they would either go to the governor or to the Senate or the Assembly for appointment. So for example, like the Senate, the Senate could just appoint somebody and they just appoint somebody, provided that that individual satisfies the statutory obligations. If it's one of the governor's appointment, then they go through a different vetting process through the executive chamber. And then usually what happens is if somebody successfully passes that vetting process, the governor's office will send a letter to the legislature and to the board saying that this person has just been appointed to fulfill, this position, either the audiologist or the individual lay member or something like that. And
Thank you.
basically anyone can nominate or recommend, and you can also be self-nominated or apply yourself. So you don't have to be chosen necessarily, as it were. You just have to be appointed by the appropriate designating authority.
So here's a question, and maybe we've covered it, I'm sure we have at one point or another. How can we find out the status of someone's request to come onto the committee?
So if somebody actually submitted a request and has gone through the process, if it was a governor's appointment, we would be able to ask if we get an update from the governor's office. It's not like we could obviously tell the governor to move forward with an appointment or to tell us a lot of information.
So if it's stalled, it's stalled.
If it's stalled, it's stalled, or it may have been denied, and they don't tell us. They don't have to tell us. And if it's one of those other appointing authorities, then there's little oversight. So we can't, for example, go to the speakers of the Assembly or the Senate and demand that they tell us, what's going on with their appointments.
But you do want the names to come originally through the Department of State?
No,
or just send right to the?
I mean, certainly with us, if we know about it, then there's more opportunity for us to try to follow up on it.
Okay.
Whereas if somebody went directly to, one of those other appointing offices, we would have less opportunity to try to follow up. Whereas if it came through us, we could say, well, we know we sent it on this day, right? We know that this person meets this criteria. There's more opportunity and sort of, I think it's more rational and reasonable for us to assume that that's why we're following up. That's certainly not required at all. So again, going back to the agenda, there were no public comments in New York City, is that correct?
I think that's accurate.
Correct. Nothing further. Thank you.
Alright, and I'm seeing that we do have members of the public in Albany. Does any member of the public wish to speak? Just for the court reporter, if you can, just say your name and speak loudly.
The mic back here? We don't have to sneak up on somebody like we used to have to do. Grab their mic.
I don't think you have to do that, but hopefully the court reporter can hear you.
Okay, my name is Fred Goosen. I'm the Executive Director of the Hearing Healthcare Alliance of New York. And we have several, we've been involved with this 37A task for the last 27 years. We have several concerns, and one of them, I'll just pick up on the one you just talked about, and Barbara will flesh it out even more, the appointment procedure, and I don't think people are clear on how that works. Barbara Ahern is our attorney and our legislative representative, and she'll carry that further. But I do want to thank, right off the bat, this young lady, Allison Lacey. I have had personal health problems over the last year, and I'm only 3.5 months behind the rules. And to get our conference, which comes up in Saratoga on the 10th and 11th, we get to have, also can see the Belmont Stakes kind of moving away when we move in. But the applications were out of date, and Allison very helpfully, wonderfully, I sent them along, and they took them under, and your office responded so quickly to that one misbalance of the technical roundtable that I used the wrong number on. Typing on the applications is a very difficult thing to do, trying to find the darn lines. But I thank you. But boy, you were so great. You were on that immediately, so give me a chance to resubmit. And I just wanted to make that clear that we've had great, and we've always had great relationships with the department in this issue. We'll be offering 11.5 credits, CEU credits, during that period, and presently we have 155 registered hearing aid dispensers registered at the event. We hold it every year. It's planned specifically so that if everybody comes every year, they get 23 credits. None of them are repeat information. It all has to be new, and it makes it very possible for people to continue that. But thank you very much, Allison, because that was, you do need to come up. Don't you come 2 days early and go to Belmont Stakes? On Sunday night, our rooms are $179. On Friday night, they're $2,000.
Yeah.
Going back to one point, dealing with OTCs, and it laps over into another area that we've talked about before in these meetings, which is online sales of hearing aids. We now have Joe Namath advertising OTC hearing aids online. And talking about those OTC, however, the advertisement lapses over into the kinds of benefits that people would receive with prescription hearing aids. That mixes between the AG's office and the Department of State in terms of regulating that issue. And we've always had problems with online sales of hearing aids, classifying them as hearing aids, and also saying we can give you a test online. Now that's against the law. That's against 37A. You cannot give. It has to be a live test.
So I don't want to speak to
I
the
apologize.
jurisdiction of the Attorney General's office, but it's our understanding that a device is a physical instrument, and it's either categorized under the FDA rules as an OTC or not. And it's sort of like the one issue where I can answer a hypothetical very easily is if the actual device itself, the instrumentality to be sold, is an OTC, it's beyond the Department of State regulation. So if a celebrity or even a non-celebrity is selling a product, a device that is categorized appropriately and lawfully as an OTC, it's beyond the Department's jurisdiction.
Yes. However, if online sales are talking and selling products that are programmable, that they offer a test to be taken online, they're selling hearing aids in New York State without following the procedures and requirements for the sale of a hearing aid.
But that particular instrument you're saying is not an OTC.
No, these have been advertised for years online. They are fully functional hearing aids. They are programmable. Not only that, but the advertisement says, that, well, they're defined as prescription hearing aids. And a prescription hearing aid requires an audiological evaluation,
Right.
examination.
Registered.
But on face to face, you have to look in people's ears. You have to do bone scores. None of those happen. You can't do that online.
You know, again, under that hypothetical, I'm assuming certain facts, that these are prescriptive devices being sold over the internet by a non-registered dispenser.
Correct.
I don't want to speak to the jurisdiction of, my colleague at the Office of the Attorney General, but that would appear to be something beyond our scope of jurisdiction.
Who would, if I were a non-registered person selling hearing aids, giving tests, looking at people's ears, doing all that stuff, who would be prosecuting me? You or them? In my office, I don't have a license, I don't have a registration, I'm just selling hearing aids.
To the best of my knowledge, it sounds as if this might be an issue of persistent illegality. And issues of persistent illegality under the executive law, to the best of my knowledge, do not fall within Secretary of State's jurisdiction.
And this is a Brant from New York City. So the Attorney General's office, whether it's through, I'm a member of the Healthcare Bureau. We also have a Consumer Frauds Bureau that often deals with, these types of complaints. 6312, Executive Law 6312 does allow our office, the Attorney General, to pursue civilly, matters that are deemed fraudulent and deceptive business practices. So that is something that we do have the authority to look into.
So would that be where, as Mr. Goosen expressed, if a provider in New York State that is a registered dispenser participates in online sales by doing an evaluation online, selling
I
online,
believe his fact pattern was that they weren't registered, they weren't licensed by us.
whether, let me add then,
Let's
whether
look at
they,
fact pattern.
I understand that. So whether they are not licensed or registered by us, or they are simply performing that online evaluation, and selling the prescribed, let's say, manufacturer ABC, and it's a product that I can carry in my office, and they're selling that online. If that's not legal in the state of New York, how do we go about minimizing those? Because that's very deceptive. If they're supposed to be selling on OTCs, that's a different category versus a prescribed hearing aid. So if it's a prescribed hearing aid, we should be able to follow the rules and regulations. And so how do we make sure that the Attorney General's office then is able to follow up or minimize those issues?
And
This is a rollover from ordering hearing aids over here by mail.
Right.
This is the same thing as by mail, the by mail
Right.
issue, except they're using
Internet,
the internet.
yes.
And they're selling real life hearing aids, and they're saying they can do everything that New York State requires, except none of it is live. And they refer to audiologists, they refer to
So,
licensed people, but that doesn't fit the part what a New York State sale of a hearing aid in New York State requires
right,
of a
so,
dispenser.
I mean, and I want to thank the, Brant from the Attorney General's office. I think the most easily understood way of trying to determine, what's appropriate or not would be looking at who the actor is. And so, as a board, obviously the board has no enforcement power, so we shouldn't be talking about specific companies or anything like that, because that would be inappropriate. But, if, for example, the actor that could be identified is somebody who's registered by us, right? So they have a license number from the Secretary of State's office, and it is believed that that actor is not complying with Article 37A, then there's potentially two avenues for jurisdiction, right? As the Attorney General's office has the civil injunctive relief, and then we have the administrative disciplinary actions.
Right.
Okay.
So that would be if that actor falls in that bucket. If the actor is completely unregistered, so they do not have a license from us, and yet they are engaged in acts of persistent illegality or deceptive practices, as what was said, by Brant, then that may be something that, the Attorney General's office may have some oversight in. Again, I can't speak to that specifically, but, I would say that if there are concerns, complaints should be brought to the appropriate agencies. I know our website, we have a complaint form. I trust that the Office of the Attorney General has some sort of public portal where, people could lodge complaints as well, and so.
We certainly do, just, we 100% do. You can file a complaint, online, depending on the bureau. The Healthcare Bureau also has a telephone line where you can call in and, file a complaint as well.
So if I were to purchase a hearing aid online, fully up, and go through whatever requirements they say they're delivering, I now can take them to court because I purchased them from a non-registered hearing aid dispensing business, non-registered hearing aid dispensing operation under 37A in the state of New York.
So I don't know if any board member necessarily feels comfortable giving legal advice about you going to court.
Okay.
Because also I don't understand the standing. You mean you personally filing a lawsuit or you personally filing a complaint for an appropriate investigative body to look into the issue.
Okay.
But I think, as Brant said, certainly an unlicensed actor selling a product that should not be sold in New York under illegal circumstances might be best viewed by the Healthcare Frauds Bureau or some bureau at the Attorney General's office.
Right. So, again, we don't do individual representation, but, when complaints are made, so I'll say that there are two tiers. If an individual were to be in a situation where they ended up buying a product from an unlicensed person that turns out to be a hearing aid that should have been prescribed through a prescription, and they had a problem with it, it's not working, they were harmed by it in some way, they're trying to recover money back for that purchase. We have services where we try to mediate those disputes. The part that I work on as an attorney in the office is if we find that, that individual may not just be a one-off situation. There might be other New Yorkers that are similarly in that situation where they have purchased, an over-the-counter hearing aid, but when they've purchased a prescription hearing aid from a non-licensed provider, and they are harmed by it, then that might be grounds for our office to open an investigation into that company to find out, what exactly they're doing, how many New Yorkers have been impacted, and if there's a way for us to either get them to stop doing that behavior and possibly, to recover, money for harmed consumers. But that's on behalf of the state, not on behalf of an individual, we're not doing an individual representation.
Your turn.
Dave, I think I'm moving into the public comment period.
Sure.
Hello, my name is Barbara Ahern. I work with Fred Goosen, who is the executive director of the Hearing Healthcare Alliance. I am the legislative representative and counsel for the organization. And I want to say, I think this underlies a lot of what Fred was saying, and part of what Eric was saying. We are very happy to see that the Department of State is going to be holding these meetings again regularly. The Hearing Healthcare Alliance has worked with the department, I think, since the passage of the current hearing aid dispensing law, what Fred refers to as Article 37A, that's in the general business law. But we need the kind of advice that members of the board ask for and receive at these meetings, and that the department staff is able to provide in response to their questions and to our questions and comments. There has been a gap since the last meeting, and usually we would see in the meeting packet at least a meeting summary of the prior meeting. If there was no quorum, it wouldn't be minutes, but the department has always done a meeting summary. And so I hope that will be done again, and that these discussions, which are very important, will be summarized and provided in the packet for the August meeting that Candy has already set up and announced here. Some of the other things that are usually provided at this meeting are a series of reports from the department. And I pulled out an old agenda, and it has an enforcement report, a processing report, an education report, and an examination report. I think that different pieces of information in each of those reports are important to different members of the public or members of the advisory board. And I hope that they will be integrated into future meetings as well. I am particularly interested in the enforcement report that is given, because I am called upon to provide the CEU course that is given as part of Fred's meeting every year on New York State laws and regulations. And if I know what kind of enforcement is being done, what kind of complaints are being made against dispensers who are not complying with specific sections, I can make that an even more important part of my presentation every year. So, I think we work together to make sure that all of the different consumer protections that are in Article 37A are communicated to dispensers, that they recognize the importance of them, and if the hammer has to come down, that they recognize that there is enforcement also. So I am most interested in seeing that report once again provided to us. And at the risk of beating a dead horse, I want to talk once again about the missing members of this advisory board. And we have worked with the department to try and get many of the vacancies filled. So there was some very general talk about this, but approximately 2 years ago, one of the deputy secretaries of state, Whitney Clark, who was overseeing this board at the time, and maybe she still is, asked the Hearing Healthcare Alliance for recommendations for the 2 vacancies that were non-audiologist dispensers and governor's appointments. And we went through our membership and people that weren't members and came up with 2 folks. They provided all the information to the department. The department subsequently provided it to the governor's office. And we can't get any information on that because it was a recommendation from the Department of State. So we really do need the department to see if there is any information that you can get from the appointments office in the governor's office, whether it's delayed but they're still under consideration, or if they have been rejected, we'll provide other people. But let's not have this just sit there with no information and no action. Again, we want to work with you to get those vacancies filled. And we do take responsibility for the third vacancy on the board of non-audiologist dispensers, and that it would be appointed by Senate Majority Leader. And we are finding someone who will approach the Senate Majority Leader and ask to be appointed. So we're all working on it. Some of them, we really need you to do what you can to at least find out what's going on. If you need additional names, we can give them to you. If not, I don't know if you can push the governor's office. But we don't have the ability to do that. On the third one, we do have the ability to see if we can get some action, and we are working on that.
But then that third one is for the Senate.
The third one is through the Senate.
So, first I just want to thank you for, at least acknowledging that we are working with you and trying to get board members seated so that we don't have, issues on vacancy. Right after this meeting, if you happen to know these people's names like handy, as soon as this meeting is over, I'll jot them down and I'll go walk over to the office and I'll see what I can.
Thank you
Find out.
very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that.
But again, also if there are any other vacancies, or people that you have in mind, please always feel free to let us know. So thank you, and as soon as you're done, I'll get those names from you. All right, so there are no other members from.
Excuse me, I'm sorry,
One more?
you've listened to me for 10 years, you know exactly what I do, just keep talking. But it has to do, Barbara and I and Eric and Carl Case, we are the Ghostbusters of the hearing aid dispensers. Because we're gonna call, and we get the call. We get the call regarding renewals. We get the call regarding the information or something has been sent in and no response is taken. We get the call, what here, what there. And it's very difficult because a lot of calls aren't answered. We know you're very short of staff, answered, no one. It's a big change from Denise and the crew that we lived with for years and Mark, we just don't know what to do. And because people their livelihood is hung on. For instance, I have a person whose renewal date is the 14th of June. She's going to get her remaining credits on the 10th. So is there a grace period if there's a problem? But what would be the best way for us to refer them to someone? We're not going to answer. We can't answer the question. But we certainly, we'd like to help them out and help you guys out because we know lots of things about this stuff. And if you have questions, I know back when the first audits were being taken, I spent a lot of time with a fellow named, was it Bill? He was all by himself in New York City. And he was conducting all the offices for the whole audits for the whole state. We spent a lot of time explaining little things, but we're really here to help as much as we can because I know that you have staff members are short and a lot of them have little experience in hearing aid dispensing situation. We don't view it as an adversary. I mean, the fact that Alice and she read me the Riot Act last year. I got a 2-page letter out of her. But we got it straightened out, and because we are the resource for almost 180 to 190 registered hearing aid dispensers in New York State for their renewals and for their registration, their training. So we really appreciate the help and the clarification of the procedure that needs to be followed. That's just a request procedurally that maybe the staff can look at it. What's the best way? We have, you guys are living it.
Yeah, why don't, after this meeting, we'll figure out if there's somebody.
A procedure that might be able to, somebody we can
reach out to.
like a specific.
But not provide their contact information, but we could directly give that information to, so it would be
2 years.
managed internally.
Yeah,
Because I do have the phone number and I have the email,
the exam.
the,
I don't know if
the,
this would go to the exam.
Customers, this is customer service.
customer service.
So like,
Email at dosnewyork.gov, and I got the 4429 number. So, but when it gets stalled or something doesn't get returned, or maybe someone's not, there's lack of communication from one point to another, how do we expedite some information to the provider so they can continue their livelihood?
One thing I would recommend is that they don't wait until their license is going to expire to get their requirements done.
Understood. But we also had a situation in which it was 9 months after the check was cashed at whatever bank it is, New York, and heard nothing about the renewal information. The check was cashed. I say, okay, they cashed the check, they must have approved it. But no, the person didn't know where to call to get stuff back.
I mean, 9 months does sound a little bit excessive.
Oh, it was.
Especially
It was
like
crazy.
if there was no back and forth dialogue, I find that a little bit surprising.
Oh, it's very
Yes,
surprising.
but the renewal process. I speak on the education
Right,
part of
the
the renewal.
education part of the process, but that 44 number, is that they would be able to provide, maybe like,
Very good.
that person would call
Okay.
and at least
Thank you.
acknowledge that like it was received or it's been logged in or something
Thank you.
like that.
Okay.
Also, email, help@dos.ny.gov.
HELP.
Great.
Yeah.
It's a good word.
Help at the dos.ny.gov.
Currently responding in about 2 business days.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Because I have been receiving, because I'm on the board, I do get people responding. And I mentioned earlier to Candace, I'm on a couple different forums online and so forth. And New York's been beating up on New York pretty good, even to the point of, I've had people respond, I can't move to New York. There's no way to get registered in New York without going through a minimum 6-month period. And that's someone that's been, a dispenser for 5-10 years. So I guess one part of the question I did raise, I think before, is how can we improve, reciprocity is not the term, but access for people that want to come into New York State, a procedure, so when that people will meet our standards, but maybe they don't have a 2-year degree, but they've been practicing for 10 years. For an example, the reason why I say that, in the great state of Denver, you don't have to have a 2-year degree. But if a person wants to become a provider, move to New York State from Colorado, they can't become a provider because they're missing a 2-year degree, but they have 10 years of experience. Can we look at developing a process, an acceptable process for ascertaining more providers? That would be one part, because without that, we are losing providers to other states as they're retiring and moving. And I can speak for myself, it's really hard to find a provider. So there's lack of access. And the second piece was when this was started, was it 27 years ago? The program was supposed to be part of, or a program was supposed to be initiated for education in the SUNY system. So how can we look at getting a program initiated, train hearing instrument specialists, so when they graduate, they can enter the workforce with a degree in hearing instrument specialists, still obtaining and still having to take the test and continuing education, which falls under the Department of State.
Eric, I think the reality of that situation is that in the beginning, they were going to develop 60 hours. Some of what designated courses were contained within that 60 hours. as opposed to blanket. Not a, although the law does refer to an educational organization and so on and so forth.
Yes.
But the 60 hours was there. I know that Mark Mesperon and I were talking a long time about somebody who's been dispensing in another state for 25 years, unblemished career. But it come in here because they didn't have a 6-month test or a 3-month test back 25 years ago. And so that poor person coming into New York State had to start as a trainee.
Mm.
As opposed to saying, well, you got 25 years of experience, maybe you don't need to be a trainee. Maybe you need to take the written exam, or maybe you need to take the practical exam like audiologists do, because you've had X number. But I think I'd be asking the department and maybe this board to put together some criteria so that would speed that process up for these people who want to come in and bring business to the state, open business in the state, but making it easier, because right now they're compared to a trainee, even though they've been doing this in this practice for 5, 10, 15 years.
So I don't know the answer offhand. I mean, I vaguely recall looking into this issue at the requesting a board member some time ago, like many years ago. The best I can recall offhand was I believe it was a statutory restriction, which would mean that this would not be something that this board could do regulatorily. But I don't want to say something that I don't have 100% sort of certainty in. But I can look into that for the next board meeting just to confirm, like, is this criteria established in statute? And if it is, the issue therefore is that it requires a legislative fix. It's not something that this board or the secretary would be able to do, on board to act. That the board wouldn't be able to act independently, or we couldn't do something that.
And if it's a regular legislative fix,
If it's
then that's
legislative.
gotta be brought to a particular legislator and get that next step.
Yes, got to go through the entire legislative process, bills passed in both houses.
But it can't go through the advisory board.
It wouldn't go through the advisory board, it's a statute. So it wouldn't, it wouldn't be something that this board would have like direct involvement in necessarily. I mean, the board could potentially say whether or not, as a policy perspective, they thought it was good or bad. Well, let's be honest with you, I'm not even so sure that's entirely within the statutory purview of the board, so I'd have to look at that as well. But I can look into the statutes to see if it's a statutory restriction versus anything else.
Would you be able to look into, as you said, will be able to look into and provide members of the board with the process to establish that if it has to go in that direction?
I mean, if it's a statutory issue, which to the best of my recollection, it is, the process is, it's gotta be, a state assembly person or senator needs to decide that this merits their, time and resources, propose a bill. It goes through the same legislative process any other state law does. It goes to the various houses, it's passed by both houses, and then once it's passed by both houses, it goes to the governor for signing.
I don't think we're asking about reciprocity as opposed to setting up
Like a different method, a different process to become licensed. So like we have one of those processes for like appearance enhancement, I believe, where like somebody who's been licensed and practicing in another jurisdiction, they have different requirements to become licensed in the state. That exists in statute though. I don't know if a similar provision
I don't
such
think
as
we have a
that
provision
exists.
for out of state in the law or the regs. I don't think. Anyway,
Right. But I
it sounds
can
like a task force.
look into it. I mean, that's just the statutory thing. So if the statute says these are the requirements and this is the only way to do it, then it's
And to
statutory.
change the statute on that would, again, be more legislative to change it.
100%, yeah. All right, there be no further public comment, I want to thank everybody for appearing and participating today. I'm going to close the meeting at 11:53 a.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, hey,